All right, I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to our budget work session 2 of Williamsport City Council. It's Wednesday, November 20th. We're in Trade and Transit Center 2, third floor. We'll start with limited courtesy to the floor, and I don't believe we've had any requests that I'm aware of. So we'll jump right into budget work session number 2. Item 2 is continued 2025 budget review. Tonight we have Office of Community Development, Public Safety, and then reviewing the miscellaneous fund budgets. So we'll kick it off with the Office of Community Development. Welcome up, Val. Good evening. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me. So I'm looking at page 47. So you'll see at the top of page 47 that my department budget is increasing by 76.2%, which I can tell by the look on your faces is outside of the normal of some of the other budgets. So here I am to give you an explanation of that. Actually, if you want to turn to the following page 48, you'll see in 2024, our department budget is projected to be over by $188,996. So when you look at the actual expenses from this year versus what we're asking for next year, we're closer to a 5% increase. So I just wanted to point that out, that we're not actually asking for those additional funds. We're pretty close to our operating for this year. And you'll notice that there was a position put back in for the office manager, which went to mediation and was returned to our budget. So that certainly makes up a large percentage of that close to 5% increase that we're asking for. Do you want me to go down each line item on page 47, or do you just want to ask questions as needed?
Does anybody have any questions? I think from last year and this year, the review pages are where the changes are at is generally been pretty helpful. Does anybody have any questions for Val? Miss Mealy?
Just a question about the $188,000 over budget this year. What generated that, Val?
Well, I can't speak
because we don't have the office manager this year, correct?
Sure,
Okay.
right. So I can't speak to how the decisions were made of how to budget for 2024 and why the appropriate amounts were not allocated to the appropriate budget lines. I can say there were definitely a few fundamental changes in, revenue streams in our department. But aside from that, I can't really attest to how those budget figures were decided on for 2024. I can just attest to the figures that we've calculated for 2025 are certainly working towards compliance and transparency with all of our HUD funding sources.
Got it. And we obviously have all those numbers calculated in our opening. That is to say that we are still under the budget that we set for 2024, despite your department being $200,000 over budget. Okay. All right. And all right, final question. So the actual salaries in your 2024 budget are 240,000, but your 2025 proposed is 208. I didn't go back to the salary detail.
Those salaries were calculated by finance and put into the budget worksheet. So I'm going to defer to Jamie on that question, if you would.
Can you repeat the question for me, Liz?
Just that the salaries, the actual estimated salaries for 24 are 240,000. The 2025 proposed are 208.
So I think you're asking for kind of what's the rationale for the difference in what was actually spent in 24.
Well, if we're adding
versus
additional
what's
positions,
versus
how we're
what's
going to come
proposed
in at a
25.
smaller budget in 25.
So the planning budget salaries this year are completed at 208. That's with a administrative reimbursement of 55,000. Last year, it was budgeted at 125.
Yeah, but we're showing the actual estimated at 240.
I can jump in and add some additional to what Jamie just said. So my understanding of the way that we were budgeted previously versus the way we're budgeted now is we are using the bulk of our allowable CDBG home administration funds in this salary line. So this salary line is only reflecting what we're taking from the general fund, and what you're not seeing, we're taking from our program income.
Okay.
That's what, so you're only seeing what's coming out of the general fund for salaries, not what we're actually paying in salaries.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I see the reimbursement line. My point is what we're showing as your actual estimated amount for 2024 is $32,000 higher than the number for 25.
Correct,
Right.
because I believe there were some issues with the reimbursements for 2023 and 2024. So we have not received the same amount of payroll reimbursements that we're anticipating, the 55,000 in
Okay.
payroll reimbursements that we're anticipating in 2025.
Okay.
We don't have the reimbursement figure included in this salary figure
So
because
it will be lower than.
it may be lower just based on
Okay.
if whatever their reimbursements are able to be this year. I have not worked with Valerie on what's left in any admin fees that they're able to pull down for their reimbursements.
Okay.
So
okay.
it could be lower than that, yes.
Got it. Okay. I mean, yeah, the numbers added up for 25 salaries make sense. I guess I'm just a little confused at the discrepancy there. Okay. And that is the totality of the reimbursement that we're going to see from CDBG and home then toward the cost of community development is 55,000. And so so basically there's no reimbursement counted into health insurance, FICA, life insurance, any of that stuff. Everything else about the budget is totally naked out of the city's general fund with the
Correct.
exception of $55,000.
Correct.
Okay. And the remaining, it seems to me that our total. I'm sorry, Valerie, I'm just putting this out there publicly because I think that'd be wise anyway. So between home and community development, our administrative spend can be 20% of community development and 10% of home, right? Which amounts to about $210,000 a year, depending on our allocation. Is
This
that
year,
accurate?
it's $225,468.95. So
24 or 25,
for
sorry.
2025.
Okay.
Yep. So we'll take out the CEDACOG payment out of that, and then the balance is where we get that 55,000.
Got it. But there are additional administrative reimbursements allowed under project deliverables within community development specifically, not so much within home, correct? But those funds are generally now paid to CEDACOG as well, and they provide the project deliverables required for those projects, correct? Okay. That's not quite the right term. I apologize, but.
Yeah, for CDBG, CEDACOG handles the project delivery. There will be some project
Okay.
delivery expenses in our home, for example, like a home rehab project. There may be
Okay.
some project delivery in there.
Okay,
Yeah.
but anyway, all of that is also allocated to CEDACOG because they're providing those documents that we need.
For
Okay.
CDBG, yes.
Got it. And so our total CEDACOG budget then is the amount that we're spending with CEDACOG pre-project deliverables delivery is about 170,000,
Correct.
right? Okay. All right. Sorry, I think it just helps to try to clarify that a bit for the public and everybody else. It's not really a pretty picture. But, that's all. Thank you.
Any other questions on community development? Okay. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Let's move to the Department of Public Safety. That is on page. Starts on page 27. I think Office of Director, Police Department kind of fall under similar things. So Chief Snyder, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome, sir.
Hello, good evening. Appreciate you guys having me. Just going over just 25 our 2025 budget review. So right now we're looking at, if you're, is everybody on page 27
Mhm.
first? So looking at 27, just starting off with salaries. Right now, this increase with the salaries is 115,634. That's with the 0% right now, because we still have to remedy the contract issue. If you do look back, though, there is a list, if you look back on page 73, it does show for both police and fire, the different increments that they have, so you can get an idea what it would look like with the percentage increase. And then just moving along, salaries and non-uniform, that's just per contract, that increases 3% per OE contract. Overtime, you're looking at a little bit with 4,000. One thing is just being with the lower numbers of officers we have, it is what it is. We talked about this in previous years. We're covering that work for those officers that we don't have. I do want to talk about, though, with the reimbursement, it's even listed in here as well as the reimbursement that we've been receiving. So right now, we're getting about $85,000 back on reimbursement for the extra events and things that the police are doing. Within this last year, we increased that by 40,000. And then we're looking to do a little bit more this year with a couple new projects we're doing, which will include the Cross Cutters Initiative that we brought to you earlier in the year. And then a new initiative with some stuff going on with investigations within the police department that's going to generate a little bit more revenue for us. That'll increase that line item as well. So just wanted to point that out. Right now, a couple of the other ones, workers' comp pensions and pension uniforms, that has, we have nothing to do with that right now. If you look at severance, we do have an officer retiring this year. I do just want to point out the fact, it does say a $40,000 increase, but the difference between an officer that's walking out the door, that's making about $88,000 rounding up versus an officer coming in, which is going to be about $57,000 rounding up. So the offset is 31,000. So you're really technically looking at about an $8,000 or $9,000 increase on that line item, just to put it in perspective. Because they'll pull that from the salary line items. Continue on contract services. That's an increase in 20,000 right now, but I do want to point out, with looking at what we're talking about with the increase of drone program, LPR, Power DMS, that is covered through the grant right now. So that funding is coming from the grant. Office rent is what it is. City Hall operating allocations, that's just the portion of ours that we have to do as the police department. Gas and oil is decreased a little bit. Our uniforms, we do have to cover the cost of 8 new vests that are going to be this year. They run for about 2,000 a piece, between 2,000 and 3,000. However, we do have a reimbursement program with that, so we can look at potentially getting back $10,000 to $15,000 reimbursed on the vests. So, and then the firearms, that'll stay the same, and the vehicle purchase will stay the same. So one thing I just want to point out, just as a reminder. So last year we decided to make some payments with ARPA funding. So we dropped our budget line items, and that was the vehicles and the ammo. And that came out to a total of $293,000 and $500. So I just wanted to point out that you look at the 5.83% increase, that puts us at 637,750. We actually are really at 344,250 if you subtract that. So our increase is technically 3.1%. So I just wanted to point that. So now we gotta incur that back or put that back into the budget. So that's why it's so high right now as that increase. I know that was asked in the first meeting on Monday. Then we just have vehicle repairs and then the vehicle purchase. And then I'll open up the floor for any questions that you may have. Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions on the police department budget? Mr. Biter.
Where are we at with our life cycle of vehicles? So after we purchase those two, how many more do we have that are aged that need to be replaced? And what's kind of the average, so to speak, for the fleet?
Great question. We're actually doing really good. So we've been keeping up with that. We're actually getting a return now. So when we trade the vehicles in this year, I think we made $15,000 reimbursed by selling those vehicles on municipal bid. So this year we're looking at to replace 2 to 3 vehicles. So we replace those vehicles. We're gonna take all the equipment, including the computer stuff, put them in new vehicles, and then put them on municipal bid. So we anticipate potentially a return of $20,000 in. So which, to your point, is now we're not running them into the ground, so we can get a little bit more for them. But we're doing really well with keeping up with our fleet. So with, like I suggested, you guys falling in line with what I suggested, don't fall below 3 vehicles each year because of the wear and tear, and keeping in mind that we're using them 24/7 with each shift going on. So they do take their toll.
Any other questions on the police budget? Chief, you said, so like the drone program, for example, that was actually being paid for out of the grant, so we'll get reimbursed for that. Or can you explain the mechanism of how that works? Is that, I know it's in the general fund, but
I don't think it's necessarily a reimbursement.
Okay.
I think we, if I understand correctly, we put a submission in for it and then get that funding for it. So we have to, it's got to be a vetted program, and then it has to meet the criteria of the grant. So once we provide that information, they give the go ahead.
I gotcha.
And then
I
they'll
got it.
provide they'll release the funding.
Okay, gotcha. So we're essentially, it's an ongoing program. We're fronting it through the general fund, essentially.
Yes.
And then the grant can help offset the cost of it. Right?
Yeah, the grant comes out of a different fund. So actually, if the drone program can be paid through the grant, then it would come out of a different fund, and the money wouldn't be needed in the general fund.
Yep.
So I mean, we can discuss that as well.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's an issue one way or the other. I just wanted to understand the mechanisms of how we expect it to work. That's all. That's all that was. So. Any other questions on the police budget? Mr. Biter.
So with that grant, that we've talked about a couple of times, but can you use that to offset any of the training dollars that are being spent? Obviously, it would go back in a later year, but in this year, could we incur those costs
Yes.
separately?
We've done a lot more training on top of what we typically do because of the grant. So we were able to do a lot more with that
Okay.
and utilize that for the training. So we had officers getting certifications on instructions, so we could do our own instruction within. So we took advantage of that, and there was a lot of training opportunities that was open to the department through the grant.
Mr. Pelisi.
Thank you. In keeping with that same line item, chief, I'm looking at again with the training for $65,000, but then the 3 sub lines below it for travel, subscriptions, dues, medical, they're all empty. Are you able to get us a breakdown on exactly what is what?
Yeah, we're starting to merge all those together, if you remember last year. So if you look at the combination and highlighted coming down on the left-hand side there, you'll see a lot were merged together. And
Mhm.
we're trying to mainstream a lot of the line items. So meaning, like, if you look down at 70180 contract services, combined medical subscription. So we're combining all those into that one line item, and that's why you'll see the blanks in the travel, subscription and dues and medical, because now that's gonna fall down into contract services where you see it 70180. They're just combining them now. Instead of having multiple line items, they're just combining them.
What's the purpose of combining them?
It makes the accounting system more clean. It was just combined, and then the budgets were combined. So anything that's highlighted yellow in the description,
Mhm.
that means that budgets were combined. And if there's no account number, that means they no longer have a budget. And if there's a dash in that section, that means there is no budget for that line item. Subscriptions did get added to contracted services, so did medical, and I can't say offhand, but I think travel might be included in training, or they just haven't had travel costs. It's all just together with
Yeah.
training.
We haven't had travel costs in a little bit. That has been covered under the training line item that we've been utilizing.
Okay. Thank you.
Quick question on the vehicle purchases. Why is that in the general fund and not in capital projects?
Because their vehicles roll over year to year to year. They take 2 to 3 vehicles and roll them over every year. We don't put them in their regular purchases. So you're better off to keep them in the general fund rather than to put them into capital projects, which is supposed to be an extended savings period.
Thanks. Any other questions on the police budget? Ms. Mealy?
So just to summarize on the overtime, chief, we're up by about, pardon me, well, I guess significantly, so we budgeted. I'm just looking, we're projected to be up pretty significantly in OT and comp time this year.
Yes,
But we're budgeting back down at the level that we were at. Why is that?
well, it was increased to $4,000 just based on the annualization.
Okay. But
Can I chime in here?
yeah,
I think what Miss Mealy's trying to get at is, based on last year's actual usage, we were way over on the $120,000 that was budgeted.
and the.
And
prior.
then this year, we're only budgeting $4,000 more than the previous year. So I guess, are we expecting
Right.
to exceed what we have budgeted in 25? I think that's what your concern is.
I guess my point is that there's taking the last 5 years and rolling it up to see how much we've been over historically, but there's also looking at a trend over the last 5 years, which would
Yes.
seem to indicate a significantly greater increase to the overtime expenditures than one would get. I mean, we don't have the last 5 years here before us, but I'm presuming even over the last 5 years, we're looking at more than 124,000 a year.
Yes.
Annualization, I'm guessing you're referring to maybe the last 10 years. I don't
Yes.
actually know what. But, so 124 seems conservative to the point of, maybe not being very responsible, I guess, in terms of our knowing what our actual expenses are. The administration, yes, we've taken in 85,000 in, repayments for police time on various events. But even if you subtract the 85,000 from the 226 we're estimating we'll spend on overtime this year, that doesn't get us to 124.
I mean, I can speak to the annualization. The budgets are dictated by the police administration. So, I mean, those are dictated to us. However, the annualization could be slightly high since the majority of their overtime happens at things such as like the summer events, like the MLB game, cross-cutter game, those types of things. So the annualization is based off of the trend throughout the year. So it may be slightly lower, but again, the budget was dictated based on the police department. So, I mean, they would have to speak to why they chose to do the 124.
Or I guess, are you anticipating greater, either way, the reimbursement from any individual goes into the general fund, correct?
I would project more. This is not what I provided. This is what was put down when I received it. So,
Okay, you would project a higher expenditure
would,
on,
yes.
I figured you probably would. Yeah, I guess part of what I'm asking you, Jamie, is there's absolutely no reason for us to undercut police overtime on the presumption that we'll be receiving funding toward it, because that funding for expenses at the crosscutters, et cetera, therefore, the funding that we get back from the crosscutters goes into the general fund, it goes into the bottom line.
It comes into the revenue.
Right.
correct. Mhm.
So, yeah, so we should be budgeting more there. And then chief, talk to me, are we operating, and I apologize for not having been paying as much attention to this year as I should have. Are we operating under the budgeted complement currently?
right now, we are at 50.
Okay,
Yeah.
so one
So
under
we're
budget, right?
one under budget, right?
Okay.
So we had a early retirement of an officer this last year. So right now, we're in the midst of our hiring phase. So we're doing backgrounds right now.
Okay. nonetheless, so we're looking at an increase of $60,000 in overtime, a decrease in comp time. Yay. But still a net increase of $48,000 between the two, right? Are we maintaining, is there greater need? Is that need driven by events? Or is that need driven by police requirement? Do you know what I'm saying?
I think so, because I think what you're saying is what I've been preaching for the last couple of years. We're operating at a level that we're way below what we should have as a complement for this size city.
But I guess partly what I'm asking when we're talking about that is the need for community policing higher, which which everybody knows that it is, but
Yes.
I mean, but is it also that we have a lot of overtime driven by special events in the city?
It's a variable thing. So we do have a lot of special events that we do
Okay.
that we're asked to do. We get tasked with certain things when we have, politicians that come to the city, and then we get tasked with doing that on our own dollar.
Hey,
for the
JD
city.
Vance isn't coming next year.
And that's something that there's no reimbursement for something like that. When we
Okay.
get stuff like
Yeah,
that.
right.
But then on top of that, it's just the everyday, day-to-day lives of officers.
Got it.
We got injuries, we got young families that are being born that officers are taking off. There's, we're
Got it.
dealing with a lot of that stuff and then trying to cover
Okay.
those hours and those shifts.
So it's a mix of the two. Understood. Just to interject, real quick, I think you responded to, some damage to my cousin's vehicle a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned how, wonderful your officers were and wanted me to pass those compliments
I
along to
really
you.
appreciate that.
So,
And I'll,
figured I might look it
offline,
up
if I can
publicly
find
as
out
long
who
as
the
I was doing
officer
it.
is, because we try to put that into their files.
okay,
Make
yeah,
sure.
he didn't give me names, but he was
Okay.
quite effusive about it, and he's not an effusive guy. So, they must have been really lovely to work with.
I appreciate that.
Mhm. All right, Adam, I think that's all the questions that I have on that, but, I'd note it for a couple of weeks from now.
Okay. Any other questions on the police budget? Mr. Mackey?
Not so much a question on the budget specifically, but when we're talking about overtime, I'm curious, do we have a final number on what it cost our city when now Vice President-elect JD Vance came into town?
Yes. What was it? I believe that was about overall, so not just the overtime. So what I had Assistant Chief Bolt do here is do an overall compilation of the hours, so straight time, everything. And I believe that was around $12,000. So
What was that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to, I couldn't hear what you said.
I believe altogether it was like $12,000. Looking at the overtime, it was a couple $1,000s, but then you're talking about all the resources now you're dedicating to that. So for
Hmm.
those hours that you're
Yeah.
pulling from the street. And now to put.
And
towards
streets and
that.
parks and, right, the water
So
barriers.
with all that, the whole thing, you're looking about 10 to 12,000. I believe it was 12,000.
Are you allowed to disinvite politicians?
Well, my question is, technically, they are not elected officials. Yeah, well, he is an elected official, but how does that work? I mean, we are not technically required to provide them with any type of security, right? I mean, there's no law that says we have to do that. So why can't we seek reimbursement from the campaign for what it cost? I mean, I'm just curious. Like, I don't understand why we can't. I mean, I know we're not going to get it. If we send them a bill,
Fuss
but
about it.
I asked the very same question and to be honest with you, I was very direct with the Secret Service about reimbursement for assisting them. And
well, I mean, the Secret Service is a governmental organization. I'm talking about the campaign itself. I mean, why can't we send them a bill?
I mean, I would say we can. I did talk to Derek about it. I forget when that happened. And I mean, the only I'm not connected with the Trump campaign by any means, and I don't even know who you would go to. I did kind of tell him, Muser might know, like that kind of stuff. I mean, I think there's some probably conduits that he may be aware of that I think he may be exploring. That's how you would do it, I would think.
Right.
So I guess, I mean, to kind of answer it for you, my assumption and hunch is that I think Derek's sniffing around that, trying to navigate that specifically, but
Yeah.
I think the larger point is, I think, you know, I think we're getting better in that area, just in general, whether it's baseball, whether it's, no, whatever it may be.
Oh, I'm sitting here thinking, well, we need to
Whatever it
write
may
a bill
be,
to
I
Little
think
League,
we're
we
getting
need to write a
better,
bill
but I
to
mean, it's,
Major
it's
League.
one of those things where, you know, we can kind of continue to do better with that. I mean, they do a lot. As far as I think special events go, and, you know, we're getting
I-
there, but.
Yeah, I agree. And I
But-
totally understand
Yeah.
that. And then what is the breakdown in terms of overtime when we're talking about special events
Yeah.
versus
It would
Uh,
actually be handy if we could track that.
when we,
Yeah.
when we say a normal shift is what, 8 hours?
Yes.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been there before. Hour 7, you make an arrest and now you've got to do the paperwork and it's gonna take X amount of time. I mean,
Yes.
what kind of policies do we have in place to make sure that, and again, please don't take this the wrong way, but you know, to make sure that officers are getting this paperwork done in a reasonable amount of time and not, you know, sitting on it a little bit, I guess, and I'm not accusing anybody of it. I'm just wondering, what do our internal processes and systems look like?
Well, that's what we have our supervisors for.
Yeah.
So they're looking, if you make a late arrest in the late hours, you're gonna stay and you're gonna clean it essentially, because now you have somebody, you have to do all the paperwork, you're doing criminal complaint, you're doing the affidavit, potentially search warrant, you have to process evidence, you have to arraign them, you have to process them. You have
Right.
To take them in front of the judge. And that's just it's a lengthy,
Yeah.
it just continues on, because then when you have that, now the officer has to go in on their own time, which is overtime for the court proceedings.
Right,
you know,
right.
In the next few days. So,
Yeah, and again, this is not me trying to accuse anybody of anything. I'm just curious about what it looks like and what the breakdown is between special events that we may or may not have the potential to get reimbursed for versus what is absolutely nothing we can do about.
Yeah.
Hence the late arrest and the, you know, that because I've been there before.
Right.
I've done that. And I know what it's like. So
yeah, right now, most officers, they just want to get home.
no,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
get it.
And just to be clear, it's more close to 10,000 for that one. So we broke it down with overtime was a little over $2,000. Shift time was almost 5,000. The special response team call out was almost 2,500. So for the JD bands.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that breakout would be helpful to understand, because I mean, again, you know, I feel like the past couple of years, we've talked about that special event piece. Again, I think we're making progress in really getting more reimbursements, probably where we weren't, and I commend that absolutely. But I do think, kind of back on the theme we've talked about, we probably are gonna get to a point much sooner than later to where we're gonna have to say no to some of that stuff. I think that's partially, I don't want to make assumptions, John. I feel like that's kind of what you're also getting at.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Generally speaking, and again, I don't want to go down a road that I'm not supposed to go down, but at some point, something's going to have to give.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, and I'm not just talking about overtime. I'm just talking about generally speaking. Because the direction we're heading in is not sustainable.
Yeah.
And anybody that thinks that it is lying to themselves.
Yeah.
So,
And you bring up
I
some
don't-
great points, and that's why I'd really like to sit down.
yeah,
And hash some of this out and talk about it, because we have some ideas that we can do. Obviously, we got to contend with the unions,
sure.
try to revamp some things. You know, we're essentially policing the same way, you know, past 20, 30 years now. But no, I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
And looking at some different things, but we're doing a tracking of all the events and the event overtime. That particular one we just broke down with everything, the total combined cost.
So that's all.
any other questions on the police budget? Okay. Thank you both very much. Appreciate the dialogue and the run through.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
We'll move to the fire department. See how much Sam's button. Just kidding. Chief, welcome, sir.
Good evening. Before you use the budget for 2025 for the fire department, you'll notice a 5.84% increase That's due to salaries. The increase in salaries, overtime, which is increased due to a couple intermunicipal governmental agreements, as well as our community outreach. FICA pensions, both uniform and non-uniform. The non-uniform actually went down $5,500. Health insurance, premiums increased 6% for individuals, 8% for families. The fire prevention and investigation line item decreased due to historical analysis of actual costs. Training has gone up $19,800 due to sending guys out to Indianapolis for FDTN, which is the Fire Department Training Network. That's some first-class training that they get. We'll be sending 2 to the academy this year, or for 2025. We have one individual who's stepping down to pursue other things. So we'll be replacing that individual. Also under training would be Blue Card, which is Blue Card certification, which is a incident command training, as well as other leadership training. And we'll be sending individuals an individual or 2 to some Pierce training, which is related to the new apparatus that we got. In addition, the travel goes hand in hand with the training. City Hall operating allocations increased due to some additional equipment that we got. Supplies and materials was combined with cleaning supplies, other supplies, and support equipment to reduce the number of line items. This increase was due to adding back the support equipment that was moved to ARPA in the previous year. Protective clothing includes 6 new sets of turnout gear and 2 sets of gear for each of the 2 new hires. Vehicle repairs has decreased due to the annual cost. Since we purchased we had the recent purchase of the new apparatus and a few new vehicles. Facility maintenance, that increased $2,000, and that was, we've been doing a lot of work around the fire headquarters. And one of the big things that we received concern with were the alerting system. So we looked into it, and they do have it's called a heart healthy alerting system. It slowly ramps up the alarm. So rather than, being there and then the tones go off and it's a sudden jolt to the heart. So, and then capital projects budget, there was an increase due to the change in the cost of the SCBA. That was in the amount of $3,866. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions on the fire department budget?
I have one.
Mr. Allison?
Yeah, Chief, the training, Meyer Fire. How many individuals are going to that?
So the Meyer Fire is actually a training for our fire inspector and our, as well as our firefighters. The Meyer Fire is in-house. It is a website that was actually included on there because I wanted to point that out to Renee, and then when she sent it over, it got added to it. So that's not the only thing that we are doing as far as training, but the Meyer Fire it deals with sprinklers and standpipes and how they function, how they work, and
So most of the forces.
they will have
Okay.
access to it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. And are we rotating out the self-contained breathing apparatus?
Yes.
For some, bring.
Yeah.
What do they cost each? I forget.
About $8,500, and
Okay.
that's with no bells and whistles.
Yeah,
That is, unpadded straps, parachute buckles, which are the cheaper, less expensive version.
Yeah.
What else was there? There were no frills to it. It was a basic air pack. We've been waiting for these to come out. They came out, they started taking orders on November 1st.
Hmm.
So just a few days ago. And we finally, this morning, we actually got input from our sales rep. So we'll be placing an order within the next couple days.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the fire department budget?
Just me.
Ms. Mealy?
And Chief, you probably said this and I somehow didn't connect it, but the increase for additional travel, what is that travel and who's?
Yeah, so that travel would include the traveling out to FDTN for a week.
Okay,
The FDTN, like I said, is in Indianapolis
Right.
area. That would include their hotel stay, their lodging, their meals. That would,
and who is it that's making that trip?
there'll be 4 individuals who are up and coming officers within the department. They currently are not officers, but this will help them in many ways become a better officer.
Mhm. Got it.
Additionally, there's 2, we'll be sending 2 to the academy this year. The cost associated with traveling down, lodging, meals.
Mhm.
And then the same thing with this other leadership training as well as blue card incident management
Got it.
training.
Thanks.
Any other questions, Mr. Biter? Did you have one?
No.
Okay. Any other questions at that end of the table? No. Okay. Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's move to environmental control and codes. Ms. Livermore, thank you for covering for Mr. Nar.
Absolutely. Good evening, council. So like Mr. Yoder said, I'll be covering the codes budget for Mr. Nar this evening. That's on page 33. It looks like there was a 0.17% increase in the codes budget. Really, there's not a lot here. Look, they took their contracted services and training down. Technology went up a little bit. I can speak to that slightly. I know they had a software that they had to make sure that they budgeted for Geo Civil Vanguard software that they use annually. Their gas and oil went down a little bit. Vehicle repairs went down a little bit. He said that was due to the newer vehicles. They have less repairs. He decreased the zoning hearing board due to the historical data. Their MMO went down. Health insurance went up just like everybody else. Not a whole lot there. Do you guys have any questions on this?
Any questions from members? Ms. Mealy?
I'm delighted that their budget has increased by so little, but we should probably insert some funding in this for historic preservation officer position within the city.
Yeah, I would agree. Was that ever discussed in any development of the budget with whether it was codes, with the mayor, with community development, historic preservation officer? So earlier in the year, the city informed the harbor board they were no longer able to support it because they didn't have the staffing. We've got to figure something out there, whether that's including a person somewhere.
Okay,
or-
I mean, I'm aware
Yeah.
of that happened, but I can let the mayor know, you want to put it into the codes area for the HARB, was it just staffing for the HARB secretary? What,
yeah, I
it's like a
think-
line item for the historical board.
Well,
Effectively, the city is required by ordinance to have a historic preservation officer. It doesn't need to be
Yes.
someone who works for the city. It could potentially be
correct.
someone else who we're compensating for the position, but we need to build some level of funding into the budget in anticipation of either someone within the city who will perform that role or someone outside the city who will perform that role.
Correct.
Right.
And I was just more interested
Mm.
in, was there any discussion or dialogue about that when you were putting the budget together anywhere? whether it was
Not during the
codes?
budget preparation, but I can, I can discuss it with the mayor and then we can, I don't talk about where to put it and let you guys know.
I think that'd be a good thing. Yeah.
Okay.
If we could accomplish.
write that down.
before
I'll make sure
December
that
5th, that'd
we
be
do that.
awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions for the codes budget, Mr.
Well,
Mackey?
I mean, just to continue the conversation, how are they getting along with their business currently?
Mary Rosinski has stepped in. One of the members of the board is performing, and she did it as
Yeah.
an employee of the city for years and years and years.
Right,
She agreed to step in for a couple of months until we'd pass the HARB, the revisions to the HARB ordinance. et
and that's,
cetera, et
I mean,
cetera.
I know I'm
That's a-
repeating it.
That's a
What-
very temporary.
Right, it's
arrangement.
not sustainable.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
And I think the ultimate question is whose responsibility is it to pay for that position, right? Because I felt like initially the responsibility was put on us to figure it out. Am I wrong?
The responsibility was definitely put on us to figure it out. I
Right.
think it will be coming from the general fund regardless. It won't
Right,
be-
okay.
right?
Yeah.
All right.
There aren't a lot of other places that can, we don't have money specifically for ourselves.
Okay.
And if we had, they would have taken it away a long time ago. But.
Yeah.
But, yeah, anyway, that, we need to find a home for it within the city somewhere. I think is more of an obvious codes responsibility because it's part of like the review of the parcel by, codes for permitting, et cetera, et cetera. But that said, it could also be outsourced. It's more or less the wisest approach to it. And that's what the administration working together with council, I think, needs to decide. So that we can put some funding in next year's budget.
Mhm.
That's in line with the possible expenditures there and then, make sure that we find, once we've passed the revised HARB ordinance, make sure that we find someone to kind of fill that role, whether it's a city hire who receives a little bit of training or a third party. I think the city hire would probably be our cheaper option, but I'd have to look into it a bit, obviously, to know.
Any other questions on codes? Okay, Ms. Livermore, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Are you doing a lot of the miscellaneous funds? That's what's next? If so, just hang out.
Yeah, I'm doing Act 13 and capital projects. If you want me to jump there, would you rather
Uh,
go to liquid fuels and then I'll come back?
It doesn't matter to me. We can do that. You're up there if you want to.
Okay, sure.
So we'll do Act 13 capital projects. Right?
Yep. I'll also do the emergency reserve.
Okay. Go ahead.
So page
60.
63 is Act 13. So there is a 17.73% increase in the Act 13 revenue. So we decreased the Act 13 allocation just based on a 5-year look back. So we decreased that a little bit. It's been decreasing slightly, the allocation that we get. The interest income, we just projected 80% of what we got for 2024. The expenditures, So for the projected expenditures, we are down 11.7%. We removed the flood levy line item that is normally in that budget per the mayor's request. We So the taser line item isn't in the budget, so you see that reduction of 300,000 there. That was just a one-time purchase in 2024. The comprehensive park plan was completed last year, so that's that reduction. And then we added a couple match grants this year. 153,290 for Youngswood Parks Improvement. 125,000 for a match for Green Lake Go for the Little League Boulevard. 65,359 for Green Lake Go for 4th Street in Mulberry, and 89,115 for a federal safety initiative grant match. There's also per request of council, on page 65, there's just a little breakdown of the surplus for Act 13 for your guys' review pleasure there. So you can see kind of where we're at cash wise. Does anybody have any questions?
Ms. Mealy.
Just real quick, which of these, we have not received the funding for Young's Woods, correct?
I'm not sure if the grant has, I think the grant has been approved.
Okay.
There is a match. I don't know. I think that there was some discussion about possible other funding sources, but we put a match in just to be safe.
Okay, got it. Okay, and then likewise, Little League Boulevard's a go, correct?
Yeah,
Enforcement,
they're
like-
actually in play right
Okay,
now,
that-
so
that's what I
the
thought.
two
I
Green
thought
Lake
maybe
Goes
it
are,
was
yeah.
The federal safety initiative.
I think that grant is in process,
Okay.
but we put the match in to be safe.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
'Cause I think they
disagreeing.
think
I'm
there's
just
a good
asking,
outcome,
like,
yeah.
to what extent this is funding we're guaranteed.
Yeah,
to be
I think
spending.
that's, I
Okay.
think that's in process, but the two Green Lake Goes are full blown, ready to go. They're already in process right
Yeah.
now, so.
Got it. And the pump track,
The pump track, we kind of split up. So last year we put the entire match in, but the full match was not required yet. So all of the completion of the pump track has not been done. So I just split it up into this year. I put the remaining, I contacted the companies that are doing it to see what would be in last year, what would be in 24 and then what would be in 25. So the match isn't changing. We're just moving it from one year to another.
and that work's already in progress, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And yeah, I think that's it. Can you go over for me? Well, and you don't need to go over it for me now if you don't want to, but what total amount we've allocated to street resurfacing?
Oh, sure.
It's real fun
and
chasing it around the
usually-
budget, so I'm trying to make it easy for myself by asking.
Usually, Streets and Parks does the whole thing, but because there was so much in here, I did it. But it looks like 250,000, which
Yeah.
is, I think, the same as last year.
Yeah, no, I meant, so we've got 50 plus some liquid fuel in the streets and parks. budget.
Oh,
Anybody chase any of
how
that
much
down?
of you want to know the total street
Yeah, the
resurfacing
total street resurfacing allocation,
proposed for 25?
because we don't even have the community development monies in here, so, or no, we do, sorry, that's stupid.
Yeah, general fund, Act 13, liquid fuels, it usually comes, well, this year was way down, but usually right around 1,250,000 out of Act 13, 350 out of my liquid fuels, and 125 plus county. So right now we're at 150-ish out of my general fund.
Okay, so that's a total allocation of 750, down from a million that we usually put in,
Yeah, the other 350, which we've done in the past, was CBDG.
and that's going to.
Right, so this year, we saved last year's, kept it with this year to get a total of $700,000 project on Little League
On Little
Boulevard.
League Boulevard, right, so we are still putting that much into street resurfacing,
Yeah.
it's just one street, and we already know what one it is, and we've already spent the money.
Yes, CEDACOG, they prefer you pick one versus a bunch of spots all over the city.
Okay,
So
got
it's
it,
easier for them for tracking and paperwork.
got it, okay. All right, so our allocation's not actually down, it's just that we split it. It's just that the community development we split over 2 years, right? I guess my point is, we're still allocating $1 million, it just looks a little different budgetarily, got it, okay, thank you.
Jamie, do you have any insight as to why the levy was taken down to zero?
Well, we didn't use the 170 from last year. It was secured for some type of certification. I wasn't part of the budget last year, so I'm not exactly sure, but we didn't use any of it last year. So the mayor had requested that we take it out for this year. So I'm
Okay.
assuming that he anticipates not having that cost this year.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Um,
Mr. Allison?
yeah, well, yeah, perhaps I should have that conversation with the mayor, because there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of different changes and.
I think the Act 13 money was specific to some sort of certification. I'm not sure if I don't know a lot about the levy, but I know the Act 13, from what I understand, there was some sort of certification. So I don't know if it was, allocated some other place, or that is what the description read, that there was a certification. It was supposed to be done in 2024. That didn't happen. So he removed it for 25. I'm not 100% sure on the details of it though.
Okay, I'll just check with him. Thank you.
Scott, you don't have any addition? Okay. I appreciate that.
So we'll follow up on that on the 5th.
Yep. Any other questions on Act 13? All right, let's move to capital projects.
Actually, Adam, can I make one point? I apologize. I should have made.
Yeah.
Sorry. So just to be clear, the city has had a handful of sort of unlooked for cash cows over the last couple of years. American Rescue Plan Act funding being one of them, right? On the huge one. But we also have had a surplus in Act 13 funding that's been running over the last several years. It looks as though driven partly by a huge amount of revenue in 23 that I was never really aware of, that I didn't realize that we took in, $700,000 more than we thought we were going to then. As of right now, our total surplus in Act 13 is down to about 81,000, guys. So when we've been authorizing expenditures out of it, and that's not to say that the expenditures that we're contemplating aren't excellent moves for the city, because I actually do think that what we've been spending our Act 13 money on is solid. But if in fact our revenue is going down, we're not going to have anywhere near those possibilities next year. And I don't have any reason to think that our revenue isn't going down there. But I think the shale is somewhat, I'm not really sure what development we'll see next year, but I don't know that it's likely that we'll see a bunch. So we're looking at probably about $500,000 we could potentially spend out of Act 13 and 25 or 26. Vince, for your running tally of how in debt we're going to be in 26.
Yeah.
Wait,
I mean,
what
go ahead, Vince.
was your number?
Oh, no, my number was merely that we've been
Just to
pulling
add on?
we've been leveraging Act 13 funds for matches for a lot of larger projects, which I think is an
Mhm.
excellent thing to use it for. That said, we will not be able to leverage much funding. We're looking at maybe $500,000 to spend in 2026. And we have been traditionally allocating half of that to streets resurfacing, which is not going to leave us a lot of matching funds for any grant candy that might come our way. So something to bear in mind. That was all. It was just a doomsday prophecy. I like to issue those this time of year.
Yeah, we're gonna have to line up and sell blood and plasma down at Gloucester Band Camping.
And sorry, any other questions on Act 13? Okay, let's go to capital projects.
Okay, capital projects on page 53. So revenue for capital projects is down 0.15%. There's not a lot of changes in there. So the expenditures are on the following page. So if you look on 54, 55, and 56, so 54 is kind of just like the breakdown for each department and their capital projects that they we'll be using in 2025. Page 55 kind of explains the items that will be purchased in 25. If you see the little chart there. So 24 and what was purchased in 24 is there, and 25, what will be purchased in 25 and what department. Codes will be purchasing a vehicle. Police department has some police PCs. Capital project or parks, I'm sorry, has a bucket truck. And streets has a leaf vac due to be purchased in 2025. And all of those are also listed on the capital projects itemized page on page 75. That's the city capital budget. If you guys are, if you see anything in orange on the city capital budget, that means that that was either added or changed in some way. Everything in green under the 2025 column is what will be purchased this year, and that should be reflected in the capital projects page on 53.
Any questions on capital projects? Smealy?
Explain to me, just because maybe I'm being real stupid here. What work the sale of City Hall is doing aside from putting, I'm assuming that we need additional funding in the capital projects budget to pay for the out years.
Well, the mayor had requested that we plug the sale of City Hall in the case of the sale of City Hall. So that would, if the City Hall sold and it sold for that amount, it would fill a little bit of the void for the unfunded capital purchases on page 75. So, or if you look on page 76, there's a red highlight that says unfunded. We had some extra items added to capital projects this year. Some departments had missed some in the past, so we added those. So everything in orange has been added. And because of that, we are unfunded for some of the savings. And the sale of City Hall is in there as a filler if that happens. We also added a liquid fuels capital budget to kind of take the sting of that a little bit. That's on page 77. So the eligible items for liquid fuels were kind of worked up into a capital budget that liquid fuels has an eligibility for capital projects each year. So working with Scott, we went through and decided what was eligible, what years he would want to purchase them. So that kind of took a little bit of the pain out of the city capital budget.
So help me to understand, we're still $560,000 short in the capital budget, even with liquid fuels? I'm
Yes,
not,
yes.
okay.
Well, if we sell City Hall with the sale of City Hall, with that, we would be 651,000 short in savings, in future savings, which would be made up in surplus sales over the years for, extended savings items.
Okay, so.
Every item in orange was added.
Right.
So
I
because there's no
understand that.
savings for any of those, it's a pretty big,
Yeah, pretty big number.
yeah.
So, but I apologize, what I'm not understanding is what work this liquid fuels capital.
So
budget is doing.
without the liquid fuels capital projects, that entire budget would be put back into the city budget.
Okay, so all of this money is not currently in the city's budget.
Correct, correct.
It is money that would be in the city's budget.
If we did
otherwise.
not put it in the
And-
liquid fuels budget.
Okay.
Mhm.
But, and this is all stuff consequently that we will be purchasing out of liquid fuels over the next several years.
Correct.
I'm assuming.
That's all eligible.
Okay, and Scott, we know we will have the budget for that? I mean, I don't understand, I don't really know a lot about how our liquid fuels allocation is determined.
Right, so that list you're looking at in the liquid fuels, they are the eligible vehicles to be able to purchase out of liquid fuels. I got all the other parks and things that I can't. So the idea was, once I sat down with Tracy last year, we did the capital projects. And I was like, okay, I can just buy these out of liquid fuels. Well, I got a bigger, broader picture of what I actually have that I'm like, we can't afford all this stuff.
Hmm.
So we sat down with Tracy a little bit and her on, let's take some of it, put it in the general fund capital projects, but I can manage through my liquid fuels as I see fit to take the, like she was saying, take this thing off a little bit
Mhm.
to purchase all them out of it. I am allowed to spend, I think right now, what are we at, 600,000, 500,000 in equipment purchases in that. That is a guideline.
Annually.
I can't just go out and spend $400,000 on something because I get an allocation, which we'll go over that when I come up, of 830 some thousand a year that I gotta
Okay.
manage through everything else.
Okay, and that's not likely to decrease dramatically for any reason over the next,
The liquid fuels,
yeah,
I hope not. It has over the last 3 years,
okay,
probably within $20,000 it's.
okay. So it's possible. I guess what I'm asking is this, with no offense to the budget, which I appreciate, it doesn't give me a great sense of year over year expenditures in such a way that like, that I, so if we're getting $830,000, $810,000 a year.
Right.
And then we,
One of the good things that I got going right now, so with the purchases, you'll hear on the December 5th resolution I got coming to council to purchase two big trucks that was approved through ARPA way
Mhm.
back. That's gonna take care of my big fleet for probably 12 to 15 years. So
okay,
there's 5 trucks right there that are gonna be within 4 years old or newer. So I don't have to, they're my big.
but
they're
those
the
we're
big ones.
budgeting annually in this liquid fuels, right? Okay.
So,
Got
yeah,
it,
I won't have to pull out $220,000 for a truck
right,
because I'm back. So
Okay.
what this is doing, it's catching me up.
got it. But yeah, no, I'm just trying to wrap my head around, we're allocating, what was it? 350 out of liquid fuels annually, did you say, for street resurfacing?
Yeah, usually that's where I'm at. This year, like I said, we were significantly down, got great prices from Hall Baker. I think Raider, I was at 101,000 out of that this year. That's
Okay.
all we spent.
Okay,
So hoping we continue to get good prices and we can keep, the paving contract down, but still doing more streets. We
got it,
did quite a bit this year with the $500,000.
okay. Got it. Okay, I think I understand it a little better now, thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
Scott, I have a question for you if you want to come back up. I'm sorry, I didn't catch you. The leaf vac truck. So looking at the capital fuels budget, I'm assuming it's a year 2020 leaf vac truck from the description that's there.
Was it in liquid fuels?
It's in liquid fuels, yes. But it's in liquid fuels, but then you also have it in the capital funds project as well. You have it.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to determine is what is the age of the current truck?
This one was 2020, but you also have one.
And are we purchasing an additional truck? Or are
We
we
have 3
replacing-
right now. One's a 2004 that's
Okay,
time to go. The other ones are 2010s. I got 2 other 2010s.
okay, so that 2020 is just.
Right. And I'm
So-
I'm looking at other ideas. In the past, they used to have walk behind leaf machines. They've gotten 2 newer ones with 2010s and they have that older one. I'm discussing with my assistant about flirting with the idea of keeping the 2 driving trucks and going back to a walk behind. It's an extra manpower, but it's not quite we're waiting on pricing. I'm just gonna throw a guess out there, maybe 80 to 100K for one of those versus 350,000 for a truck. So we're flirting with some ideas on maybe we can reduce down to 2 drivables and a walk behind to help save some money there as well.
And then they can just be attached to.
Right, you
trucks
pull
we
them behind
already
a
have.
truck, yep,
Okay.
yep.
Ms. Mealy?
Okay, but so we've got 3 total. I'm seeing 1 that we're budgeting out of liquid fuels and 2 budgeted out of, the city's budget. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so there could be a potential with that truck that's in here for 350. And I end up deciding to go with a walk behind.
Yeah.
And there could be a potential $250,000 savings right there if I decide to go that route. Once this truck's up for purchase in 2025, I decide not to get a truck and we do a walk behind.
And why, why are we budgeting to replace the 2010 this year and the 2004 in 4 years, 5 years?
I was trying to make that truck last as long as I could.
Okay.
That truck has lived its life, but just before I showed up.
Mhm.
So we tried to limp it along because of the price. So I was, luckily, once we started building this capital project, then it fell in.
Mhm.
And I was trying to flirt with ideas like in the last year of this truck is this last year. So
The 2000,
whether I get
the
another one or-
2004.
yeah, the 2004.
Okay. So it looks like more we're talking about,
I
you
didn't
could
want
potentially replace with the walk behind the 2004,
four.
but,
Right.
and then we'd replace
Right.
the other one. Okay.
Right,
got
and
it.
I knew when we built this and, I could have put it in when I first came in with, when Tracy was here 2 years ago, building this capital projects, I could have put it in at that time and said, well, I need a truck because it's at its lifespan, but I decided to Band-Aid it along,
Mhm.
so I didn't have to expend 350,000.
Right.
My suggestion with that, if I may, if I would hope that you would do some kind of a time study to see what the additional labor cost would be with a walk behind and the overall lifespan of the walk behind. So that way, if we're gonna spend $500,000 over the life of a walk behind versus $350,000 over the life of a truck.
Right. But and I'm gonna throw it out there, the maintenance cost, I believe is gonna be down, like, because and I can have Josh, my assistant, speak to it because he was actually, he ran one, so.
Walk behinds aren't too bad. They're a lot less maintenance on them. It's just a trailer and a chute. Now the truck, you have a whole entire truck. You have to maintenance everything. The labor is not bad. It's, you got guys that's just walking, one guy driving a truck, one guy with a chute, one guy raking. But they didn't, now, that was the old style that I had when I started here. Now they have styles that you can sit behind and run the controls. So it'd be about the same, it's probably actually faster than the old one was, but not as fast as the leaf trucks, but you don't need the leaf trucks everywhere. There's places where the leaf trucks can't get into that this walk behind will get into a lot easier. So.
And no, touch on that. So the newer trucks now, they have they're 2 engines on them. Just the walk behind's only gonna have one. So it is like I said, if something happened to an engine, which we had happen not too long ago, the whole truck was down but the still ran, but the pony motor didn't. So that was an expense that we had to take down and get fixed. But like I said, this is, we're thinking about it. It's just a thought that where there is a potential for cost savings if the numbers line up versus the manpower that's gonna take me versus one guy just driving around. I don't know. But we'll chat about it when the time comes and the best option moving forward.
And I assume a leaf truck can only be used as a leaf truck.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, that's the other thing. It's a hard pill to swallow to pay $350,000 for a truck that sits 11 months out of the year.
Yeah.
It only runs. I try to get the equipment that's versatile that I can use throughout the summer versus just use it for 1 month and park a $350,000 truck. It's hard to do that. So that's why we're flirting with this other option.
Any other questions? Mr. Mackey?
Sam, Chief Unks, could you just give us a quick rundown on the fire apparatus and the trucks? And I'm just looking at some of the line items here. Just kind of give us an overall idea of where we're at, lifespan, that sort of thing. 75. I do see here it's the reserve quint. It's listed as reserve. So can you remind me again? We have the new one, and then we have the new used one.
Right, correct. So we have a new tower truck. That's the one with the bucket on it.
Right.
The new red and black one.
Yep.
And then we have a used quint that we purchased.
Right.
That's just, it's basically an engine with a ladder on it.
Right. And we have a new pumper coming.
We have 2 new pumpers.
Two.
coming.
Okay.
Correct.
So, and we're comfortable with the amount of savings we have plans for the next 15 years. It looks like the pumper's only good for 11 ish.
Yeah, 11-ish.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions on capital projects? Okay. Emergency reserve,
Okay, emergency reserve fund is on page 51. There's a 33% increase in the revenue for 2025 that's projected. I just went with the same for the interest across the board. For the majority of them, I went with the same 80% of what we had in 2024. The only expenditure listed here would be the moving the money that essentially should go into the emergency reserve fund for the overage in taxes from 2023 back into the general fund. That is just listed here so that you guys can see that.
page 52.
And really, those are the only, there's not a whole lot in the emergency reserve line item, so.
Any questions from anybody? This is pretty cut and dry. So. I was trying to pull up the Excel sheet, my computer shut off. I mean, is my math right? I mean. Based on rough math, I mean, we should have probably what? Like a little over $8 million in there, somewhere in there, is that right?
I'd have to look at the actual bank statement, just doesn't have a cash total on it.
Could you get that for us?
Absolutely.
When you get a chance?
Yeah.
I'd be interested. I mean, we've put a decent amount away the past few years and for good reason, right? Levy, Grappius Run. I mean, at some point. We're gonna have to do something with City Hall, whatever it is, wherever it is. So we're gonna need that mechanism and then funding, but then. I mean, the other component of this too, I mean. There's a learning aspect to this too. I mean, when this was implemented, we're naturally putting excess tax revenue in there just to try to have a natural savings mechanism, but over the next few years. If that keeps up, we're gonna, as a group, I think have to have some. I don't want to say introspection, but just there's gonna have to be a balancing act there of. That excess revenue and putting it away versus using it in the general fund. I mean, we're gonna need it to a degree, but. I guess we're gonna have to, I hope we can try to balance it as much as we can and continue to put some stuff back because. The budget's gonna be rough the next couple of years, but. It's not gonna. Or the other big problems that we're trying to solve are not gonna go away, so.
Sorry, just one.
Yeah, please.
If we just real quick on the capital project again, the emergency rescue vehicle.
You mean on page 75? I'm sorry.
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
page
That's okay.
75. Sorry, I apologize. I love page numbers and I should be giving you page numbers. Emergency rescue vehicle, 310,000. The funding method is listed as ARPA.
It was purchased from ARPA in 2023. That's.
Was that not the money that Jamie Flick?
This was another vehicle that was purchased that you guys had purchased in 20.
How many emergency rescue vehicles do we have?
I'd have to look into it and see what it was.
I was under the impression that Jamie Flick secured that funding.
That's
that's
something different. That's your Bearcat. That's not $300,000. That's much.
Well, what emergency rescue vehicle is that then?
I will have to look
Okay.
at that for you. That was from the previous year, so.
Okay, I'm just curious. What's that? Right, I'm looking at line item, I'm just looking at emergency rescue vehicle, year acquired 2023, $310,000. Funding method is ARPA.
Yeah, so and
Right.
maybe that was proposed to be purchased from ARPA.
Okay.
So I mean, we can definitely correct that.
Okay,
But I mean, it's still not being, if it's being granted, you guys have an earmark for it, so we shouldn't need savings for it, so. But
Right.
we will update
Okay.
the funding and the year of purchase.
Can you remind me again how much that vehicle was that he acquired for us?
About 365.
360.
Did we get that?
Not yet. It's
Not yet?
It's being built right now.
We got the funding already? Any other questions on emergency reserve? Okay, Jamie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I mean, does anybody have any more questions on liquid fuels? I feel like we kind of went through that one when we did Act 13, but Scott, if you want to come up and go through it again, you can, but
Yeah,
Make
why
him
not?
get his steps in.
what's that?
So we're making him get his steps in.
Yeah, I mean, we've got covered a lot of it. So yeah, the 2025 projected revenue, we're up 0.65%. Like I said earlier, we are anticipating 830,955, and for the year 2025, we won't know that until March, I believe, exactly what we get. And project expenditures at 0.18. So, I mean, any questions? Like we discussed a little bit earlier, we do have a trending downward. I don't have the data. I mean, a lot of this liquid fuels is based off of the miles that are in the city and the residents. I think we're at, according to this, 27,754 people for population. So said it has gone down since I've got here, at least I'm guessing somewhere $20,000-$30,000.
Any additional questions on liquid fuels?
Is there any
Yeah.
way that we can petition the state? Because obviously things are getting more expensive year over year, and that continues to go down, but things aren't changing. Our need isn't changing.
I will have to look into that. I don't know what the stipulations are on that. I know every municipality has a population and a road miles, and they must have a formula that they go by. And that's just what we get, and that's what Wilsock gets, whoever else gets it. I'll have to look into, see if there is a cost of living,
Yeah,
increase,
essentially,
right? Yeah.
Any other questions on liquid fuels? Okay. Thanks, Scott. And then City Hall Operating Fund. Chris, is that you for both? Okay, whatever.
I didn't. prepare
Sorry,
for that.
I didn't realize that. I was thinking IT, and was not thinking facilities. Sorry, Scott. So welcome back. What page are we on?
That's what I was gonna ask you.
Okay. I'll tell you what, when the first one finds it, just call it out. How's that?
57, maybe?
Okay. Yep, 57.
Okay. We are up 5.60%. And facilities, information technology, I'll let you, right? Do that, your tech.
Hey, Scott, what page you on real quick, bud?
Is this for? Which facilities specifically are these for? Is this for City Hall, just trying to keep it?
Well, this is, so the facility would probably be the main maintenance of it, the lights, the gas, the maintenance that my guys are in there doing right now, just to make sure it stays from freezing.
Okay.
I see it looks like a 7,000 decrease in contracted services. Stormwater, that went up, obviously, you know that. Gas is up $5,896 up on electric.
And again, just to clarify, this is just for City Hall.
Yep.
This is not for Public Works, any of the other facilities.
No, the police, the public works, that we all have our own facility line item for doing the work there.
Any questions on facilities?
How many years have we been out of City Hall now?
2 or 3?
3? Okay. So we're knocking on 50 Gs. For an empty building? Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Ms. Mealy?
Just a quick question. To what extent is the building deteriorating at all, Scott?
What's that again?
To what extent is the City Hall building that we're not currently occupying deteriorating?
Obviously, you know, any structure without being lived in or worked on, you know, it goes down. I know we just had, a furnace company in with the compressor was down, so we had to fix the compressor and some of the heating units to keep them running. Yeah, I mean, my guys are in there once or twice a week now that the weather's getting colder, be every day occurrence just to make sure nothing happens. But yeah, I mean, every time it's ticking. We either, we
Yeah.
gotta do something.
One or the other, yeah.
So, but we are dumping money into it just to try to keep it heated.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Scott. Mr. Black. IT.
Good evening, everyone. You'll see my budget's going up about 16.64%. The bulk of that is for increases in salaries and benefits. We're taking half of the police IT position into my department.
What's the reason for that?
It's currently funded under a grant. We just want to make sure that that grant continues. If we can get the funding for it for the next full year, great. If not, we want to make sure that he's taken care of yet for this coming 2025.
Okay.
But if we don't get the grant, then we've only funded half of him?
Valerie can add to that with the grant.
Okay.
So the grant that funds this position was originally to be spent by the end of 2024, but PCCD has extended it to the end of 2025. So my understanding, and Justin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, originally that position would have ended at the end of this year. But because we were able to do a modification to extend it into next year, we can extend his position into next year, but not in a way that would be fully funded by the grant, because he has been working with the city for a certain period of time, and the grant was supposed to end at the end of 2024. Does that make sense? Okay.
How likely are we to get further grant funding for that? I mean, but we have a good expectation of achieving further funding, or it's a crapshoot?
The
Sorry.
current grant that the police have is not a grant that recurs annually. So we will
Okay.
have to seek different grant funding, and we have not yet identified the grant that would cover that, but we are working with Delta to
Got
do
it.
that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on information technology? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
any final questions just on anything? I mean, we've kind of gone through everything in about an hour and a half, so.
Oh, go ahead.
Ms. Mealy, and then Mr. Mackey.
Always. Hey, Scott, before I lose you, what's our current do you know what the current surplus is in liquid fuels? Over and above what we receive annually? I mean, I see we're spending 180K more than we're receiving this year.
I want to say 900, yeah, right in there right now, but I haven't paid Hallbaker yet.
Okay,
So usually going into winter time, right around 500,000-600,000. By the time my allocation comes in March, I'm right around the 300,000 to 400,000 mark. And that's what I usually try to carry over every year.
okay, so then effectively there really isn't any more I guess I'm confused since we're showing expenditures of 180,000 more than what we're showing in terms of revenue in liquid fuels this year. Are we spending down a surplus or are we, do you see what I'm saying? Is there less money in liquid fuels at the end of this year than there would have been, or?
No, we're
Okay,
right now. I'm right on track where I'm usually at,
okay,
for the paving coming in at the end of the year. And then
okay. Is it just, I mean, it looks as though we're substantially under what we budgeted for last year. So is that the difference, that we over budget annually and then we come in
so,
on
yeah,
budget?
so I over budgeted for the paving
Yeah.
and I
right.
only spent 101,000 this year
Yeah,
out of it.
okay.
I anticipate 350, but
So that's what's, but so practically speaking, there's not really extra money in liquid fuels. It's just that we over budget and then we also.
right. I
Okay.
try to think heavy on it because, and that's why I tried to roll in 300,000 to 400,000 roll over, because there's that blizzard year. that
Yeah,
really
something
hammered
crappy
me
happens,
hard to where
right.
I'm gonna
Okay,
go over
got
and
it.
overtime and everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Mackey?
I didn't know she was done yet or
Yeah,
not.
I wasn't sure either, but
I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure either. I just wanted to give her a
John.
couple seconds.
Yeah.
Because I think I have another question for Scott. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Scott.
That's why I was like, is she done?
Monday,
Do I interrupt?
My bad,
It's like
My
church,
bad.
Scott. You're
All
up,
right.
you're down, you're up, you're down.
And maybe you don't know the answer to this. This was going back to Monday, the Bowman Field maintenance of $50,000. Is that include what we're contractually obligated through
Right,
the
yes.
MLB
Yep.
contract?
Yeah, 25 is what we put in the facility. 25 is put in there for MLB.
Right, so. And the mayor's not here, but does anybody have any idea where we stand? Because as far as I can remember, the Yankees was it, right? That was the last year of the contract, no?
I can find out when the end of the contract was and let you know.
The end of the contract was this last cycle, so I think his
Yeah,
question
so I'm
is,
not
do we
sure.
have any update on the
Yeah, I have
negotiations with it?
no information on it, but I can notate it and let.
And I can call the mayor
Yeah, we
myself,
can.
but
Yeah.
I'm just curious if we're still budgeting 50. Is that a good sign that that Major League Baseball is going to come to the table again with a contract? And if so, when will that happen? And hopefully, and again, you're
Right, no.
the one standing up there. Derek's not here. Hopefully that happens.
Yeah.
Not at the 24th in the 23rd hour when it's
Yeah.
getting jammed down our throats, that we actually have some time to think about it. So.
And I think, like your point specifically, I think there's some thoughts that individual members have on that contract that if there's a negotiation happening, that we would like to see incorporated into that.
Yeah, I don't know if that
Specifically.
negotiation's happening, but
Right.
Yeah, I understood.
I'm not trying to put you on the hot
Yeah.
seat.
right.
Understood.
I foresee it still continuing. I don't know when
Yeah.
that is.
Right, okay. And then obviously it wouldn't be a budget session if I didn't mention the fact that we have budgeted 50,000 for brick streets and have probably never spent it. So brick streets. I just feel like I have to say brick streets at least once during a budget
And
session.
about 3 weeks ago, I said something to Bill. I said, they're gonna bring this up. I said, we gotta start doing something.
No, they're not going to bring it up. I'm going to bring it up.
Right,
I'm the
so-
only one that ever talks about it. So.
So the idea and I'll give you my Bill and I's thoughts on this, right? So 50,000 obviously ain't gonna fix a big portion of brick. So what we're gonna do, what I talked to Bill about recently, we're gonna try to he's gonna look into getting a spec. I know there's a spec in the way it's gotta be built. We're gonna do probably, we're gonna get something priced out over by Bowman, that little chunk there, that's brick. And see what something like that, I priced out an alley 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And it was out by Confusion Corner. That was over 100 grand.
Right.
Just for anybody to touch it. So I was like, 50K is not enough, but so me and Bill's gonna try to work on something to try to
Right.
fix that.
Well, so again, I mean, Rural Avenue aside, that seems to be the big ticket brick street in town. I'm still asking myself, what is the historic value of a lot of these other brick streets? Some of them, I'm not saying that they're not, one part of town is more important than the other, but there are some brick streets in town that I ask myself why. And Rural Avenue is even one of those, but
Right.
I'm in the minority on that, but at any rate,
Not saying anything.
yeah.
But yeah, to your question, Bill and I are looking at it,
Okay.
to try to start doing something and getting
Right.
some accurate prices. That way in the future, if we do decide to redo a street, we have accurate numbers of this is what we're gonna have to budget this year.
Right.
Moving forward. But yeah.
Because again, they do wreak havoc on our
Yeah,
vehicles, yes.
I.
Not only our vehicles, but the public's vehicles.
Right.
Right, okay.
Yep.
I was gonna wait for Scott to sit down before I asked my question. But real quick, Scott, while you're up there, and John had mentioned it yesterday, and I wrote it down and I forgot to mention. But and maybe Jamie, you could look at it too, but on page 36 under flood control. Line item 62060 flood control materials. Increase due to previous year being funded by ARPA is $25,000. Are we able to see if any of that could potentially be funded by the money found by Keller?
There's is there a match for that?
I think we did note, I think the mayor did jot that down. Someone did ask that to see, I think Mr. Yoder did, if we were able to use any of the levy money or grant money or earmark money towards that, and I'm not sure.
So
Oh, I'm sorry, it was Mr. Biter.
I'm-
Sorry,
I'm
please,
flattered
please
that-
forgive me. It was Mr. Biter.
I'm flattered that you confused me with him.
I don't really remember much of today, let alone 2 days ago, but I think the mayor did write that down. So we'll get an answer for you.
So, yeah, we'll talk to him about it. We'll look into it, but I think one of the things that we want to make sure of is there's no match. So I'm not gonna get 25,000 and have a $25,000 match for the same thing. So that's what we're gonna ask him.
Okay. Good.
You done?
Okay.
Hey, wait,
We'll see. No, I'm good.
any other questions for Scott? And just any other questions in general on the budget before we close this out?
I'm sure you're thankful that this is not snow right now.
Well, I got the runs to worry about now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Scott, thank you very much. Item 3, announcements. Our next regularly scheduled city council meeting is Thursday, December 5th. 7 PM, Trade and Transit 2, 3rd floor here. Upcoming meetings, December 5th again, 7 PM is our next city council meeting. And then our following one will be December 12th and will be our last of 2024. And I will announce we're gonna have a brief executive session following related to collective bargaining. Is there a motion, a second for adjournment?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Motion adjourned. Thank you all.